My name is Dr. Adrian Keller, a field archivist specializing in institutional collapse sites. The abandoned Briarhurst Regional Hospital had been on my list for years, not because of the local legends, but because of the missing architectural archives from its final decade of operation. I intended to locate the original blueprints, catalog what remained, and, if luck cooperated, walk out with a record the Historical Commission had been nagging me about for months. I had no intention of lingering longer than necessary. I certainly had no intention of descending into the basement. But that changed the moment I stepped inside and realized the elevator wasn't where it was supposed to be. I had arrived a little after 10 a.m., late enough for daylight to fill the long western windows of the main hall. The building was a typical 1960s concrete monolith. Flat roof, faded teal trim, windows lined like dead eyes. The front doors had been removed years ago, leaving two rectangular jaws of rusted metal framing a blast of stale air. The smell hit me immediately. Old paper, mildew, and something metallic that felt almost warm in the throat. Inside, my boots crushed a layer of glass and grit. My flashlight beam shuddered along a corridor lined with peeling green paint and murals of smiling cartoon animals that had somehow survived decades of neglect. I made notes in my handheld recorder. Entry point marked, temperature anomalously warm for an unheated structure, immediate observation, unusual repositioning of lobby elevator. According to every set of plans I'd studied, the elevator should have been flush against the right wall of the lobby. Instead, a blank concrete panel greeted me, as though the shaft had never existed. I told myself it was just structural modification in the hospital's later years. Bureaucracies love remodeling. But a faint, uneasy thrum had already started in my chest. The kind that warns you when something about the world around you is slightly, quietly wrong. I headed down the main hallway toward the administrative wing, jotting down reference points. The building's acoustics carried each step farther than it should have. Footfalls echoing down intersecting corridors, bouncing unnaturally like there were additional hallways behind the walls. I paused more than once, thinking I heard someone shifting in another room. But each time I swung my flashlight around, the beam met only dust motes drifting through the sunlit angles. Around 10:30, I reached the records office. The door hung on one hinge, the interior gutted except for a rusted filing rack slumped sideways on the floor. I scanned for anything intact, photo logs, patient files, architectural notes, but the drawers were empty and the shelves bare. Everything that might have mattered had either been burned or looted long ago. Except for one item. A clipboard lay in the corner, the paper surprisingly intact beneath a layer of dust. I crouched, brushed the surface, and read the first line. Basement renovation phase 3, storage and containment. Clearance required. The date stamp was only 2 weeks before the hospital's abrupt closure. Containment wasn't a word you often saw in civilian facility documentation. I flipped through the attached pages. Most were blank, but one page had a rough hand-drawn schematic. The basement outline looked nothing like the original architectural plans. There were rooms I'd never seen, corridors branching in impossible angles, and a circular chamber in the far corner labeled simply, Sub 7. My throat tightened. Sublevels weren't mentioned in any of my reference materials. I followed standard protocol, photographed the pages, logged the discovery, sealed the clipboard in my pack. And yet, as I stood, I noticed something odd. A faint vibration trembled through the soles of my boots. Not seismic, not mechanical. Something far more rhythmic, like a pulse coming from deep below. I told myself it was imagination. Old buildings settle, wind tunnels through vents, animals nest in lower floors. But the vibration grew slightly stronger the longer I stood still, as though aware of being noticed. By 11 a.m., I'd made my way toward the central stairwell. The hospital map on the wall was sun-faded, half-torn, but still showed a basement level. Just one, marked storage, laundry, and mechanical. Nothing about Sub 7 or the labyrinth I'd seen on the clipboard schematic. I clicked on my flashlight, stepped onto the first stair, and immediately smelled something that didn't belong. Antiseptic. Fresh, sharp, unmistakable. Not the stale leftover odor of cleaning agents, but something that seemed recently used. I paused on the landing and listened. Briarhurst had been abandoned for 22 years. No one should have been down there. No generators, no running faucets, no HVAC. But I could hear something faint but steady, a dull hum, almost like an industrial fan running behind several walls of concrete. The further I descended, the colder it got. My breath didn't frost, but the air felt thick, the kind of cold that holds weight, like standing in a walk-in freezer with the compressor running. I reached the basement door, a heavy steel fire door with a smear of rust along its edges. The push bar stuck at first, then gave way with a groan. I stepped inside and let the door settle back into place behind me. The hallway stretched long and dim, lit only by scattered beams of sunlight leaking through broken ventilation grates near the ceiling. Debris littered the ground. Broken gurneys, toppled carts, soggy cardboard boxes collapsing into themselves. I took a slow breath, letting my eyes adjust. Then I saw the first print. A boot print, clear as day, pressed into the thin layer of dust. Fresh, a size bigger than mine. The dust around it wasn't disturbed by drift or wind. It hadn't been there long. My mouth went dry. I followed the prints only a few feet before they stopped abruptly in the middle of the corridor, as if whoever left them simply vanished. No return prints, no trail leading elsewhere. Just a sequence of 5 or 6 perfectly defined impressions ending at a blank stretch of floor. I crouched beside the last print, examined its edges. Sharp, clean, recent to the point of impossibility. The dust layer wasn't thick, but even a small draft should have softened the edges. Standing again, I aimed my flashlight ahead. The hallway curved slightly left, the linoleum curling up like old skin. The hum I'd heard earlier was louder now, low, vibrating the stillness like something running at slow, steady intervals. I walked toward it, listening for any change in pitch or direction. About 50 feet down, the corridor branched. To the right, a laundry room filled with overturned machines and a smell like wet insulation. To the left, a heavy door stood slightly open. The sign above it read, "Mechanical access. Basement only. No patient entry." I nudged it open with my foot and swept my light across the interior. A long metal staircase descended into what should have been the boiler room. But instead of the pipes and tanks I expected, the space opened into a concrete chamber with walls that looked newly constructed. Smooth, uncracked, wrong for a building this old. And far below, at the very bottom of the stairwell, a faint red glow pulsed. Every instinct I had screamed to turn around. But I'd come to document the hospital's hidden modifications. This was exactly the kind of anomaly my commission wanted. So I steadied my breathing, tightened my grip on the handrail, and descended. Halfway down, the hum shifted. Not louder, closer. I froze. In the silence that followed, another sound emerged. Soft dragging, like something pulling across concrete. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't random. It was slow, rhythmic, deliberate. The red glow flickered below. I leaned slightly to see the base of the stairs, and my stomach dropped. Something moved at the bottom. I couldn't see it directly, only its shadow, long and distorted, cast against the opposite wall as it passed in front of the red light. The shape was wrong. Too tall, too thin. Its head tilted at an impossible angle, like it was listening to something above. Like it was listening to me. The dragging stopped. I didn't breathe. Then, almost lazily, the shadow shifted, as if the thing below was turning its face upward, toward the staircase. I swallowed a tight knot of panic and took one silent step backward. The metal stair creaked. The shadow snapped upright. And then whatever was below started moving toward the base of the stairs. Fast. The moment the shadow jolted upright, a cold pressure slammed into my chest. The kind that only hits when you know you've done something catastrophically stupid. I backed up another step, slow, silent. But the metal stair beneath me betrayed me again with a thin, sharp creak. The thing below paused. Not long, just a heartbeat. Then it surged forward with a suddenness that felt wrong for anything with bones. I didn't run. Running would have made noise, and noise felt like invitation. Instead, I forced my legs to move one careful step at a time, keeping my flashlight angled downward so it wouldn't catch the creature's attention any more than it already had. From the corner of my eye, I saw the flicker of the red glow dim as the thing crossed between it and the stairwell, blotting it out completely for an instant. That meant it was close, much closer than I wanted to believe. Halfway up the stairs, I heard the first sound that didn't belong to the hum or the dragging, an exhale. Not human. Too long, too steady, too empty, like air being pulled through something soft and hollow. I don't know why, but that sound made the hair on my neck rise harder than the sight of the shadow had. When I reached the landing, I forced myself not to slam the mechanical access door. I eased it closed, inch by agonizing inch, until the latch clicked into place. I stepped backward, gripping my flashlight hard enough that my knuckles ached. The corridor ahead was dim and empty, but I couldn't trust that emptiness anymore. I focused on the quiet. Nothing. No dragging. No exhale. No hum. The building had gone dead silent. I didn't know which was worse. I took 2 slow breaths to steady myself, then turned to look for the exit signs. The main stairwell was behind me, down the hall, but the static air felt thick in my lungs, as though the concrete itself was holding its breath with me. I forced my boots to move, each step soft, cautious, deliberate. Then something tapped. Not a knock, just a single, dull tap from the other side of the mechanical access door. I froze so quickly my flashlight jittered in my hand. The tap came again, exactly the same, slow, deliberate, like someone testing the thickness of the steel, or the patience of the person standing outside it. I backed away 1 step, then another. Then the tapping stopped. Good, I thought. Maybe it can't open. The door handle twitched. Just a little. Just enough for the metal to scrape. I didn't wait to see if it would turn again. I kept my light low and moved fast but quiet down the corridor toward the stairwell. My heart hammered so hard the rhythm felt like footsteps under my ribs. I counted doorways as I passed them: laundry, storage, biohazard disposal, hydrotherapy. That last one still had a cracked tile mural of waves. Someone long ago had drawn a face inside one of those waves. A face with no eyes. I looked away fast. The stairwell door was 30 feet ahead, slightly ajar. A thin stripe of sunlight slid through the crack, hitting the floor like a lifeline. I reached for the handle. Then something behind me breathed. Not a tap this time. Not a scrape. A breath. Closed. Right behind my left shoulder. I turned reflexively, swinging the flashlight toward the sound. Nothing there. Just darkness. But the dust in the air was swirling, gently, like something had just moved through it. I didn't think. I yanked the stairwell door open and flung myself into the shaft of sunlight. My boots hit the first stair hard. I grabbed the rail and sprinted up, 2 steps at a time, the building echoing each impact like I was making an announcement to every floor that something was coming up behind me. By the time I reached the main floor landing, my lungs were burning. I turned to shut the stairwell door but stopped short. It was already closing, slowly, softly, as if someone on the other side was letting it drift just enough to avoid making sound. A thin line of darkness narrowed, then disappeared as the latch clicked with a sound that seemed far too polite for what had followed me. I backed away, hands shaking so badly the flashlight beam jittered across the hall. The main entrance was 4 corridors ahead. I told myself all I had to do was keep walking toward daylight. Keep my pace steady. Don't look back. But on my 3rd step, the overhead lights flickered. The building had no power, no electricity, no functioning circuits. Yet the lights blinked once, long enough to show something terrible. Every door in the hall was cracked open exactly an inch, perfectly uniform, as if something had walked past them and given each one a gentle nudge. The lights died again. I felt my chest tighten so hard I thought I would faint. I kept moving, turned the corner, walk past the nurse's station. Do not look into the dark rooms. Do not look into the glass of the medicine cabinets. You might see something behind you that isn't actually behind you. Just walk. But the building had other ideas. Halfway to the lobby, the PA system crackled. Not loud, not even intelligible. Just a faint hiss, like someone breathing too close to an old microphone. The sound rose, dimmed, rose again. I forced myself not to stop walking, but my legs felt like they were dragging anchors. Then the PA whispered one single word. a whisper shaped like breath escaping a collapsing lung. Down! I stumbled. The word hung in the stale air, repeating softly, the recorded loop degraded but unmistakable. Down, down, down. My throat closed. My mind tried to rationalize old audio tape, water damage, mechanical distortion. But the whisper didn't sound mechanical. It sounded like the same breath I'd heard behind me in the basement, a breath forcing itself into a word. I tried to tune it out and hurried toward the lobby. But then something else joined the whisper. Footsteps. Not mine. Not behind me. Above me. The ceiling tiles trembled as something heavy paced across the floor above. Slow. Monotonous. Heel drag, in human cadence. The floorboards creaked. Dust drifted from the seams between tiles. Whatever was above me was large, and it was following my movement beneath it. I broke into a half-jog, half-stumble, boots slapping the floor harder than I wanted. The second I moved, the footsteps above accelerated, matching my pace exactly, as though the thing up there wanted me to know it could mirror me perfectly. At the next turn, the pacing above shifted direction, angling to meet me at the corner. I skidded to a stop. If I turned left, it would be right above me. If I turned right, I'd be going deeper into the hospital. Straight ahead was storage. No good options. I backed up until my shoulders hit the wall. The ceiling above went silent. Completely silent. That silence was somehow worse. I steadied my breath, then bolted left anyway, hugging tight to the inner wall, praying whatever was above couldn't track precisely enough to. A ceiling tile to my right slammed downward, exploding against the floor. I screamed, couldn't help it, and stumbled backward as a shape dropped halfway through the hole. Just enough for me to see its arm, if you could call it an arm. Too long, too pale. The joints bent backward. The skin stretched thin like wet linen. The fingers were impossibly long, reaching, searching, swaying like antennae. Then they aimed toward me. I turned and ran. Full sprint. No subtlety. No silence. Just pure animal panic. The lobby door was ahead, sunlight pouring through the doorway like salvation. I sprinted harder, lungs shredding. Behind me, something tore through ceiling tiles. One after another. Fast. Close. I reached the lobby. 10 more feet. 5. Then a shadow swept across the floor beside me. Too fast. Too big. Like something long and thin was crawling along the walls to cut me off. I burst through the front entrance, and the sunlight vanished. The second I crossed the threshold, everything went black. Not a natural darkness. Not a cloud covering the sun. Just instant, complete night. And when my vision adjusted just enough to make sense of the dark, I realized I wasn't outside the hospital anymore. I was standing at the top of the basement stairs. The mechanical access door below was wide open, and something was breathing up at me from the darkness. I didn't understand at first. My brain rejected the scene in front of me because it shouldn't have existed. A second ago, I had sprinted into the open air, felt wind on my face, seen sunlight spill across the concrete lot. Now I stood at the top of a stairwell I had already escaped, staring down into a shaft of darkness that looked deeper than before, wider than before, wrong in ways my mind couldn't articulate. The mechanical access door at the bottom was no longer slightly ajar. It was fully open, yawning like a throat. The faint red glow pulsed from within, slower than before, like a heartbeat struggling to keep rhythm. Each pulse illuminated only a sliver of what lay below. Broken concrete, scattered debris, and a shadow that shifted in ways that didn't match the light. Then the breathing rose, slow, wet, pulling in air as though tasting it. I staggered backward, my hand slamming against the metal railing so hard it stung. My flashlight flickered violently, reacting as if something was interfering with it. I tightened my grip until my palm cramped, and I forced myself to breathe. You're hallucinating, I told myself. You ran too hard. You panicked. You passed out. Except the steel railing dug into my spine when I leaned back, cold and real. The stairwell smelled like mildew, dust, and something newly opened. An earthy, coppery scent, like a wound torn into the building itself. Then the breathing changed pitch. It wasn't just inhaling anymore. It was sniffing, testing the air, testing for me. Every muscle in my body went rigid. I raised my free hand and covered my mouth, trying to stifle my breath. The creature, whatever it was, dragged one long inhale through the dark. Something heavy shifted at the bottom of the stairs, but I couldn't see it. Only the shape of a shadow a few feet inside the mechanical access room, swaying in place like it was deciding whether to approach. Slowly, silently, I crouched low, keeping my center of gravity tight. My foot slipped on a thin scattering of grit, and the tiniest crunch echoed down the shaft. The breathing stopped. Absolute silence. Then something tapped the metal railing below. Once, directly beneath me, I jerked upright instinctively, flashlight beam darting downward. For half a second, the light caught something pale. Something that withdrew instantly, impossibly fast, like a limb pulled out of reach or a face turned away. Whatever it was had climbed higher on the stairs than I thought. I turned and bolted up the flight in front of me. The second I moved, the breathing below exploded into motion. It wasn't walking. It wasn't dragging. It was climbing. Fast. Violent. Hands or something like hands raking up the steps with wet, slapping impacts. The metal stair shook beneath me. I sprinted. Up the stairs. Through the first door. Into the corridor above. But the hospital had shifted again. This wasn't the basement level I had come from. The hall was clearer, cleaner, paint unpeeled. A faint fluorescent glow lit the ceiling. Not harsh, not bright, but enough to see that the walls weren't rotting. No debris littered the floor. No dust. This looked like the hospital before abandonment. But it was silent. Dead silent. I slammed the stairwell door behind me and threw the bolt across it. My breath came ragged, but there was no time to breathe. The thing climbing behind me wasn't slowing. I could hear it slam into the door, the metal vibrating against my palms. Then the bolt slid, on its own. I grabbed it with both hands, forcing it back into place, my muscles straining as something on the other side pulled in the opposite direction. The bolt moved atomically, millimeter by millimeter, like invisible hands were peeling my fingers away. I braced a foot against the doorframe, using my weight as leverage. The bolt clicked fully back into place. The force pulling against it stopped. I pressed my ear to the metal, listening through the tremble in my bones. Nothing. No breathing. No movement. Just silence. But silence here wasn't safety. Silence here meant something was watching, waiting, adjusting. The corridor stretched in both directions, left toward the surgical wing, right toward the central atrium. I didn't know if either direction offered escape, but anything was better than staying near that door. I moved left first, keeping my back to the wall, my flashlight low. My reflection ghosted in the polished linoleum floor, but the reflection didn't match my movements perfectly. I noticed on the third step that my reflected leg lifted a heartbeat after mine did. A delay, a lag, subtle but undeniable. I kept walking. The surgical wing sign came into view overhead, but as I approached, the letters blurred slightly, like heat distortion on asphalt. I blinked and refocused. The sign looked normal again, except the arrow now pointed in two directions at once. Right and left. Impossible. I backed away, shaking, and the fluorescent lights flickered. When they came back, the sign had changed again. The words were different. Sub-7 access. I stumbled back, almost tripping over my own boots. The hospital wasn't showing me the real layout. It was guiding me, or hurting me. The lights flickered again, longer this time. The hallway dimmed until only the emergency lights glowed red. That red glow was identical to the pulse in the basement. My stomach lurched. A door clicked open down the hall. Not slammed, clicked. Slowly, carefully, like someone inside had been waiting for me to reach this exact spot. I raised my flashlight and aimed it. The door was half open, a narrow band of darkness yawning behind it. The placard beside it read hydrotherapy. But the same room had been on the basement level moments ago. Shouldn't be here. The darkness inside shifted. Something in there was breathing. Again, slowly, methodically, shaping the air. I turned on my heel and ran toward the atrium. This wing was wrong, alive in some way I couldn't process. The walls groaned like lungs expanding and contracting. The floor pulsed. My boots skidded across freshly waxed tile that shouldn't exist. Around the corner, the large atrium windows came into view, bright light spilling through them. Daylight. Real or not, it was something. I sprinted harder. As I closed the distance, the light grew brighter until it was blinding. I didn't slow down. I threw my arm across my face to shield my eyes and burst into the atrium, and ran directly into a wall. Not just any wall. A blank, flat concrete wall blocking the window. The light wasn't sunlight at all. It came from a single flood lamp mounted above, humming faintly. The atrium was sealed. Every window covered in concrete from the inside. A trap. Something behind me exhaled. Right behind me. Very slowly, I turned. The thing stood halfway down the corridor, tall and skeletal under the flickering lights. I still couldn't see its face, if it even had one, but its head drooped forward like a marionette without strings. Its arms hung longer than they should, fingers dragging soundlessly across the floor, bending slightly like wet reeds. Its torso expanded inward, then outward, but not like breathing. More like the ribs were rearranging themselves, pushing against the skin. Tilted its head. The bone, or material like bone, cracked as it twisted. I backed against the concrete wall, every instinct screaming at once. The thing took a step forward. Not walking, sliding. Its limbs didn't move the way limbs should. They retracted, extended, folded. Took another step. I subconsciously lifted my flashlight. The beam hit it, and the creature froze. Not in pain, not in fear, in recognition. It tilted its head a fraction farther, like it was studying the light, studying me, matching the shape of my stance, the angle of my arms. Then it took another step. 2, 3. Somewhere in the walls, the PA system crackled. A faint voice whispered, barely audible, "Basement." The creature exhaled again, more excited this time. A rasping shudder like air forced through a torn vent. I realized something then, something that made the world tilt sideways. It wasn't chasing me randomly. It was guiding me back to the stairs, back to the mechanical access door, back to sub 7. I ran, not away from it, that was impossible, but toward the only corridor that didn't twist on itself, toward the direction I hoped led anywhere but down. As I sprinted, the PA whispered louder, harsher, "Down, down, down." And the thing behind me began to follow, faster, closer, shifting its limbs like knives scraping across the floor. I hit the corner, turned, and froze, because waiting in front of me was the basement stairwell door, wide open, and something inside was laughing. The laugh coming from the stairwell wasn't human. It wasn't even close. It rose and fell in brittle layers, like a dozen throats stacked on top of one another, each producing a different pitch. None of them matched. None of them sounded like they belonged in a living creature. The noise skittered up the walls and down the corridor until it felt like the entire hospital was vibrating with it. I tried to stop my feet from moving, but momentum carried me 2 steps closer, the open stairwell yawning like a mouth in front of me. My flashlight stuttered in my grip. The beam danced across the steel railings, down into the blackness, catching only fragments. Curling shadows, a glimpse of the red pulse deep below, the impression of something shifting just out of sight. Behind me, the creature advanced. I could hear it sliding along the polished floor, hear the long scrape of its limbs, hear the wet hitch in its breath. I didn't dare turn around. I didn't want to see how close it had gotten. The air behind me dropped several degrees, cold enough that it burned the back of my neck. The creature's shadow stretched ahead of it, reaching toward my boots like fingers. The laughter from the stairwell cut off suddenly. The silence that followed was worse. A soft whisper rose, breathy and broken. "Come down." I stumbled backward, putting my shoulder against the wall, trying to angle myself away from both the creature behind me and the stairwell in front of me. For a moment, an impossible moment, I thought I might slip past the stairwell door and run for the administrative wing. But the building had started bending itself around me. Reality wasn't stable anymore. Every hallway felt like a trick. The creature behind me exhaled again. Wet, eager. I forced my flashlight into its direction without fully turning my body, just enough to catch the edge of it. The creature froze mid-step. It wasn't looking at me. It didn't even seem to have a face capable of looking, but something in the beam made it hesitate. Its limbs twitched, folding and unfolding in small spasms. I didn't know if the light heard it or if it was simply curious, but hesitation was the only gift the building had given me all day. I took 3 slow sidesteps toward the opposite wall, keeping the flashlight trained on the thing's center mass. The stairwell door was still open to my left, the darkness inside pulsing with that slow, unnatural rhythm. I needed distance. I needed space. I needed any direction that didn't drag me back down. The creature's arms snapped forward, too fast, too sharp, stretching farther than any joint should allow. Its fingers brushed the edge of the light beam and recoiled instantly, like touching something hot. It jerked back, folding into itself in quick, panicked flinches. The realization hit me. The light wasn't recognition. It was repulsion. That was the first real advantage I had. My heart slammed painfully as I aimed the beam directly at its chest. The creature shrieked. Not loud, but high-pitched and metallic, like metal scraping against glass underwater. It skittered backward in an impossible motion, limbs bending and twisting in ways that made my stomach flip. It retreated a few feet down the hall, pressing itself into the shadow where the light grew weaker. For the first time, it looked unsure. I didn't hesitate. I pivoted and ran down the corridor away from the stairwell door, flashlight clenched tight, every muscle primed to bolt. The building's layout twisted again as I sprinted, the paint peeling instantaneously on the walls, the lights flickering between ancient yellow and fresh white, the floor tiles changing pattern under my boots. I didn't care. I just needed to keep the stairwell behind me. But the building didn't like that. The PA crackled overhead with static. Massive static, the kind that rattles teeth and engine rooms. Then a distorted voice broke through, louder than any whisper I'd heard so far, shouting almost, "Basement access open." My stomach lurched. Ahead of me, the door at the far end of the hall swung open on its own. The mechanical access stairwell. Again, no matter where I went, the hospital rerouted me back to it. I slowed, skidding on the tile. My breath tore at my chest. The doorway pulsed with red light. The air rushing from the dark smelled like rust and mold and old, wet stone. Something down there was waiting. Something the hospital wanted me to meet. Behind me, the creature shrieked again. This time, it wasn't repelled. It was enraged. The sound hit with physical force, slamming down the corridor in a vibrating wave. The fluorescent lights overhead burst one by one, raining glass. I threw an arm up to cover my face, backing slowly away from the louder shrieks, keeping the flashlight trained backward. The creature came into view around the corner, crawling on the walls in a way that broke geometry. Limbs bent backward, body twisting, head dragging along the ceiling. I stumbled as it moved closer, jerking violently every time the beam hit its skin. It opened its mouth, or what I think was its mouth, wide enough that the jaw seemed to split. A static howl poured out. It didn't care about the pain anymore. It wanted me down those stairs. I ran to the nearest door, hoping desperately it would open. It didn't budge. I sprinted to another. Locked. Another. Sealed. The creature's pace quickened. Its limbs rattled against the wall with horrible elasticity, stretching and snapping back as it gained speed. The hospital's emergency lights turned red. All of them. Every corridor. Every corner, every reflection, and with that red came the sensation I had dreaded the most. The floor beneath my boots trembled. It was breathing again, the building itself breathing around me, under me, through me. I stumbled backward toward the only open door, the stairwell. The hospital had boxed me in with precision, with intent. The creature drove me toward it like herding prey. I reached the threshold of the stairwell and froze. Just for a heartbeat. The darkness inside pulsed with a soft glow, rhythmic, eager. Something inside shifted, moving in slow circles, waiting. The laughter started again, higher, sharper, rising in multiple pitches, layers of sound folding over each other until it became an echo in my ribs. The creature behind me slammed both arms onto the floor, pulling itself forward like a spider dragging a broken body. I had two choices: go down or be taken, and the hospital made the choice for me. The floor buckled, gently, almost helpfully, and tilted me forward. I fell, hard, down the first few stairs, landing on my shoulder so hard the flashlight flew from my grip and clattered several steps ahead. Pain shot up my arm. The stairwell roared with echoing laughter. The creature above screamed triumphantly, a sound so shrill my ears rang. I scrambled to my feet and grabbed the flashlight, spinning to see if the creature had followed me down. It hadn't. It stood at the top of the stairs, perfectly still, head tilted. It didn't need to follow. It had done its job. I aimed the flashlight at it in a final act of defiance. But the creature didn't flinch. It pointed one long, trembling arm downward into the stairwell, commanding me, or warning me. I didn't know which was worse. Behind the creature, the hospital around it twisted again. Walls shifting, doors rearranging, floors stretching. The entire structure convulsed, pulling itself away from the stairwell entrance, sealing it off with shifting concrete and collapsing beams. The creature blinked out of view behind the moving architecture, like a curtain closing over a stage. And then, silence. I was alone. Alone with the mechanical access stairwell yawning below. Alone with the red pulse deep inside. Alone with the whispering rising once more from below. Sub 7. That was the first time I felt it fully. The pull, like gravity bending downward, as though something beneath the hospital had reached up and closed a gentle hand around my spine, urging me deeper, urging me to see what lay at the bottom, urging me to understand why the hospital had never let anyone leave. I gripped the railing. My heartbeat matched the pulse below. One step, then another, downward, toward sub 7. The air thickened the lower I went. Not colder, denser, like the stairwell was narrowing around me even though the concrete walls hadn't moved. Each breath felt like pulling syrup into my lungs. My flashlight beam jittered across the steps, following the red pulse below. The light throbbed steadily, patient, like a beacon guiding me toward a place I had no business seeing. I kept one hand wrapped around the railing because the steps felt subtly uneven under my boots. Not broken, just wrong, like they had been poured or shaped by something that didn't understand how stairs were supposed to function. The whispering rose again, not words at first, just breath, then faintly, deeper. I don't know if the voice came from one throat or many. It sounded like layers of whispers stacked on top of each other, each pitch slightly off. Hearing it was like feeling spider legs brushing the inside of my skull. I forced myself not to look back up at the sealed entrance. The hospital had closed me in completely, no path upward, no visible seam of daylight. I was inside the building's intention now. Halfway down the next flight, the red glow faded for a moment. Total darkness swallowed the space so fast that my flashlight seemed to shrink. The beam couldn't penetrate more than a foot in front of me. I stopped, chest heaving quietly. Then something below moved. First a soft shift, then a scrape. Not metal, not stone. Skin. Skin sliding against concrete. I froze, breath trapped in my throat. The scrape repeated, slightly farther to the left. Not approaching, circling. The red glow flickered back to life a second later, weaker, as though the light source was breathing too. My legs shook. The hand holding the flashlight felt numb. But something stronger than fear, curiosity or survival instinct or sheer incredulity, pushed my foot down to the next step. One at a time, carefully, quietly. By the time I reached what I thought was the bottom, the architecture of the stairwell changed abruptly. The concrete walls stopped. Instead, a long corridor stretched ahead, tall, narrow, and pitch black except for those pulsing red lights embedded in the walls every 20 feet. The arrangement was uniform, precise, too deliberate for a hospital basement. This wasn't medical. This was engineered. I held my breath, listening. There it was again, breathing, But this time it came from behind the walls, deep, steady, as though the corridor itself was inhaling and exhaling around me. The floor was smooth, polished metal. My flashlight beam drifted over small, sharp scratches along the surface. Claw marks? Footprints? Couldn't tell. The air carried a faint electric hum that vibrated in my molars. I recorded instinctively into my handheld device, but the second I pressed the button, the recorder crackled with static and died. I tried tapping it. Nothing. Something in sub 7 was interfering with electronics. I swallowed hard and walked forward. Each step echoed too loudly, like I was stepping into an empty oil drum. The corridor stretched longer than seemed possible for the footprint of the building above. Every few feet I found discarded medical items, bent surgical clamps, shatterproof syringes, a cracked anesthesia mask. None of them were dusty. None of them were aged. Somebody had been down here recently. Someone alive, or something living. I kept the beam steady until it caught on something ahead. A door. Heavy steel with a small, rectangular window at eye level. The glass was coated from the inside with a foggy residue, but something moved behind it. Something tall. For a moment, I thought it was the same creature from above, but its silhouette was thicker, bulkier, less fluid, more human. I exhaled slowly, letting the sound slip between my teeth. My heartbeat thundered loud enough I was sure whatever was on the other side could hear it. I stepped closer. The figure behind the glass didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't turn. It stood perfectly still, head lowered, arms hanging at an unnatural length. Its outline looked elongated, like it had been stretched slightly beyond human proportions. I lifted my flashlight to the window. The moment the beam hit the glass, the figure snapped its head upward. Its face slammed against the window with explosive force. I staggered backward, slamming into the opposite wall. My flashlight clattered to the floor, flickering violently. The thing behind the glass pressed its face harder, distorting the fogged window. I could make out only fragments. Jaw unhinged too wide, mouth trembling open like a puppet. Eyes bulging too far forward, pupils blown out. It didn't scream. It breathed. Long. Hungry, like it was scenting something through the cracks. A high-pitched whine rose in the corridor, not coming from the creature but from the walls themselves. A low siren, muffled but building, as if the entire sublevel were waking up. The creature's breath fogged the glass faster, harder. Then it spoke. Not a phrase, just one word. Yet the sound of it detonated through me like a physical strike. Down. My mouth went dry. Even deeper. There was a deeper level. Sub 7 wasn't the bottom. I scrambled to grab my flashlight. The creature slammed its fists on the inside of the door, metal rattling. Then it went still, unnervingly still, its head twisting slightly as if listening. To me, or to something behind me. I turned. Further down the corridor, another door stood open. A draft of cold air slipped out. The red lights dimmed. The breathing in the walls stopped. Everything, every sound, fell away in an instant. Then a new sound emerged. Footsteps. Soft. Measured. Not from the creature. From lower. From the open stairwell beyond the door. Something below was coming up. The creature behind the glass hissed, retreating from the window like it feared what was approaching more than it wanted me. That terrified me far more. I backed away slowly, flashlight trembling in my hand, aiming toward the open door at the corridor's end. The metal floor hummed under my feet with a faint charge, the static rising like the building was bracing itself. Then the footsteps stopped, just out of sight, just below the threshold of the open door. Silence stretched out, long, cold, and then something's fingers wrapped around the edge of the doorway, pale, emaciated, the knuckles protruding like stones beneath thin skin. Another hand appeared, then a third, then a fourth, all gripping the metal frame with unnatural patience. My breath caught in my throat. A shape rose slowly into view. Too many limbs moving with deliberate intention, pulling a body up from the next level. The head came last, tilting as if to slide into the beam of my flashlight. I stepped backward, Once, twice, the creature behind the glass whimpered. Actually whimpered. The thing climbing up the doorway stopped just as its face aligned with the light. It wasn't an expression. It wasn't even a face. It was a mask of stretched skin, empty in the center where features should have been, as if the skull beneath had been erased. Then, in a voice not spoken aloud but vibrating through the metal walls themselves, it whispered, "Sub-8." My knees buckled. There was an 8th level. I turned and ran. I don't remember choosing direction. I don't remember thinking. I followed the corridor as it twisted, as it narrowed, as the red lights flickered overhead. The floors dipped slightly, gravity bending downward as though the building itself wanted to drag me back. Behind me, the creature crawled fully into the corridor, limbs clattering against metal like knives on tile. The walls began whispering. Not breath, not names, just numbers. Descending ones. 8, 7, 6, 5, faster. 4, 3, 2. I slipped around a corner and nearly collided with a massive metal hatch built into the wall, circular and industrial, sealed with a wheel lock. A sign above it read, "Containment access, level sub-7." I choked on a breath. This wasn't the way deeper. This was where they put something they wanted to trap. The crawling thing behind me screeched. The number whispers escalated. The lights flickered violently. I grabbed the wheel lock on the hatch, turned. Too easily, too willingly. The hatch opened a crack. Cold air blasted out, and a single eye stared back at me from the darkness inside. Not human, not animal. An eye far too large and far too intelligent to belong to anything Earth-made. It blinked slowly. Then the whisper came again. This time from behind the eye, from something massive. "Come in." Then something below moved. First a soft shift, then a scrape. Not metal, not stone. Skin. Skin sliding against concrete. I froze, breath trapped in my throat. The scrape repeated, slightly farther to the left. Not approaching, circling. The red glow flickered back to life a second later, weaker, as though the light source was breathing too. My legs shook. The hand holding the flashlight felt numb. But something stronger than fear, curiosity or survival instinct or sheer incredulity, pushed my foot down to the next step. One at a time, carefully, quietly. By the time I reached what I thought was the bottom, the architecture of the stairwell changed abruptly. The concrete walls stopped. Instead, a long corridor stretched ahead, tall, narrow, and pitch black except for those pulsing red lights embedded in the walls every 20 feet. The arrangement was uniform, precise, too deliberate for a hospital basement. This wasn't medical. This was engineered. I held my breath, listening. There it was again, breathing. But this time it came from behind the walls. Deep, steady, as though the corridor itself was inhaling and exhaling around me. The floor was smooth, polished metal. My flashlight beam drifted over small, sharp scratches along the surface. Claw marks? Footprints? Couldn't tell. The air carried a faint electric hum that vibrated in my molars. I recorded instinctively into my handheld device, but the second I pressed the button, the recorder crackled with static and died. I tried tapping it. Nothing. Something in sub-7 was interfering with electronics. I swallowed hard and walked forward. Each step echoed too loudly, like I was stepping into an empty oil drum. The corridor stretched longer than seemed possible for the footprint of the building above. Every few feet, I found discarded medical items, bent surgical clamps, shatterproof syringes, a cracked anesthesia mask. None of them were dusty. None of them were aged. Somebody had been down here recently. Someone alive. Or something living. I kept the beam steady until it caught on something ahead. A door. Heavy steel with a small, rectangular window at eye level. The glass was coated from the inside with a foggy residue, but something moved behind it. Something tall. For a moment, I thought it was the same creature from above, but its silhouette was thicker, bulkier, less fluid, more human. I exhaled slowly, letting the sound slip between my teeth. My heartbeat thundered loud enough I was sure whatever was on the other side could hear it. I stepped closer. The figure behind the glass didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't turn. It stood perfectly still, head lowered, arms hanging at an unnatural length. Its outline looked elongated, like it had been stretched slightly beyond human proportions. I lifted my flashlight to the window. The moment the beam hit the glass, the figure snapped its head upward. Its face slammed against the window with explosive force. I staggered backward, slamming into the opposite wall. My flashlight clattered to the floor, flickering violently. The thing behind the glass pressed its face harder, distorting the fogged window. I could make out only fragments. Jaw unhinged too wide, mouth trembling open like a puppet, eyes bulging too far forward, pupils blown out. It didn't scream. It breathed, long, hungry, like it was scenting something through the cracks. A high-pitched whine rose in the corridor, not coming from the creature but from the walls themselves. A low siren, muffled but building, as if the entire sublevel were waking up. The creature's breath fogged the glass faster, harder. Then it spoke. Not a phrase, just one word. Yet the sound of it detonated through me like a physical strike. Down. My mouth went dry. Even deeper. There was a deeper level. Sub-7 wasn't the bottom. I scrambled to grab my flashlight. The creature slammed its fists on the inside of the door, metal rattling. Then it went still, unnervingly still, its head twisting slightly as if listening. To me, or to something behind me. I turned. Further down the corridor, another door stood open. A draft of cold air slipped out. The red lights dimmed. The breathing in the walls stopped. Everything, every sound, fell away in an instant. Then a new sound emerged. Footsteps. Soft. Measured. Not from the creature. From lower. From the open stairwell beyond the door. Something below was coming up. The creature behind the glass hissed, retreating from the window like it feared what was approaching more than it wanted me. That terrified me far more. I backed away slowly, flashlight trembling in my hand, aiming toward the open door at the corridor's end. The metal floor hummed under my feet with a faint charge, the static rising like the building was bracing itself. Then the footsteps stopped, just out of sight, just below the threshold of the open door. Silence stretched out, long, cold, and then something's fingers wrapped around the edge of the doorway, pale, emaciated, the knuckles protruding like stones beneath thin skin. Another hand appeared, then a third, then a fourth, all gripping the metal frame with unnatural patience. My breath caught in my throat. A shape rose slowly into view. Too many limbs moving with deliberate intention, pulling a body up from the next level. The head came last, tilting as if to slide into the beam of my flashlight. I stepped backward. Once, twice. The creature behind the glass whimpered. Actually whimpered. The thing climbing up the doorway stopped just as its face aligned with the light. It wasn't an expression. It wasn't even a face. It was a mask of stretched skin, empty in the center where features should have been, as if the skull beneath had been erased. Then, in a voice not spoken aloud but vibrating through the metal walls themselves, it whispered, "Sub-8." My knees buckled. There was an 8th level. I turned and ran. I don't remember choosing direction. I don't remember thinking. I followed the corridor as it twisted, as it narrowed, as the red lights flickered overhead. The floors dipped slightly, gravity bending downward as though the building itself wanted to drag me back. Behind me, the creature crawled fully into the corridor, limbs clattering against metal like knives on tile. The walls began whispering. Not breath, not names, just numbers, descending ones. 8, 7, 6, 5, faster. 4, 3, 2. I slipped around a corner and nearly collided with a massive metal hatch built into the wall, circular and industrial, sealed with a wheel lock. A sign above it read, "Containment access, level sub-7." I choked on a breath. This wasn't the way deeper. This was where they put something they wanted to trap. The crawling thing behind me screeched. The number whispers escalated. The lights flickered violently. I grabbed the wheel lock on the hatch. Turned. Too easily. Too willingly, the hatch opened a crack. Cold air blasted out, and a single eye stared back at me from the darkness inside. Not human, not animal, an eye far too large and far too intelligent to belong to anything Earth-made. It blinked slowly, then the whisper came again, this time from behind the eye, from something massive. Come in. But when it saw the bone doorway, it recoiled so violently its spine cracked, turned and ran, fast, terrified. Whatever hunted me before was afraid of what waited below. And that made the choice simple. I wasn't going down. I spun and slammed my flashlight into the wall panel, hoping, begging, that I could trigger a malfunction, a failsafe, a misfire. The screen flickered. The corridor shook with a low growl. Then, impossibly, a thin seam of light cracked open in the ceiling above me. An exit. A way up. A way out. I lunged for it. The bone doorway slammed shut behind me with a deafening crack, and something enormous roared in fury from the depths below. The seam of light split the ceiling in a sharp, perfect line, so bright and thin it looked like someone had sliced through the concrete with a blade of pure daylight. Dust rained from the edges as the crack widened, the hospital shuddering beneath me like something massive had rammed the structure from below. The roar that followed rose from sub-8 with a depth that didn't belong underground. It shook the corridor, rattled the bone doorway behind me, and vibrated through my ribs until I tasted blood. Whatever lived in that spiral descent, the thing the hospital wanted me to meet, was furious I'd been given a way out. I jumped. My fingers caught the lower edge of the split ceiling with a desperate, scraping grip. The metal cut into my palms, searing pain through the skin, but I held on. Below, the floor rippled outward like something enormous pressed against it from underneath, rising, searching, pushing for me. The ceiling crack widened further, the light intensifying until it lit the entire corridor, swallowing the red glow and turning the bone doorway behind me pale and dead-looking. The intangible force pulling me downward, toward sub-8, fought against the upward draw of the light. My spine felt like it was caught between two magnets, one yanking me skyward, one dragging me down like a hand around my ankle. Beneath me, the corridor floor buckled violently. The first hand broke through. Not a human hand, not an animal paw, a thing of bone and muscle cords, long talons scraping against metal. It dug into the floor, pulling a body upward that wasn't supposed to fit through the corridor at all. The skin over its forearms stretched, tore, reattached, like the creature was rebuilding itself as it clawed toward me. I tried to haul myself higher, fingers slipping on the heated metal. I kicked upward, gripping the edge with one hand, then the other, the muscles in my shoulders screaming. The light above felt hotter now, warm, almost pulsing, like sunlight through flesh. The edges of the seam glowed unnaturally bright. Below, the creature's second arm tore the floor open. Its head rose into view next, a shape half-formed, half-molding itself out of whatever substance had once made it whole. No face, no bone structure, just a shifting mass trying to become something recognizable and failing. It shrieked with a voice that seemed layered with dozens of incomplete throats. The roar from sub-8 answered, louder, angrier. The creature climbing toward me screeched at the reply, as if caught between two masters and terrified of both. My grip slipped an inch. I scrambled upward, fingers burning. The seam widened like the hospital was prying itself open. A gust of air blasted my face. Cold, but not basement cold. This was outdoor air. Real wind. I smelled pine, grass, rain, freedom. Something the hospital hadn't allowed me all day. I pulled myself higher. The creature below lunged, claws swiping through the air where my leg had been a moment earlier. It let out a warbling scream and surged upward, its body contorting to lengthen its reach. The corridor twisted around it like a throat trying to swallow something too large. Another roar bellowed from sub-8, this one so close the bone doorway behind me bulged outward. Something enormous struck it from the other side, cracking ribs, distorting bone. Everything down there wanted out, or wanted me back. The light above intensified, searing my vision. The seam in the ceiling snapped wider until the cracked metal peeled back like a hatch. A rush of wind hit me. I could see sky, gray and storm-heavy, but unmistakably sky. I lunged upward with every remaining ounce of strength. My arms locked around the edge of the opening. Below, the creature leapt. His talons slammed against the wall inches from my boots. Its weight dragged it down, but it clung, clawing upward again, ripping grooves through the concrete. Its face, or the suggestion of one, tilted up toward me. It emitted a whisper like dry leaves breaking. "Adrian!" I kicked downward. My boot connected with soft cartilage. The creature shrieked with a pitch so sharp the metal around us bent inward. It fell back, tumbling onto the floor, limbs splintering and reforming midair. The roar from Sub-8 hit again, louder, and raged, shaking the corridor with enough force that dust erupted from every seam. The creature stopped moving, not from impact, from terror. It went perfectly still, crouched low, trembling like a cornered animal. Its entire body flattened to the metal floor, trying to minimize its presence. Then a new sound emerged, a scrape, long, slow. From below the bone doorway, something larger, much larger, began climbing. That was enough. I hauled myself through the ceiling slit, elbows bleeding, vision swimming. The storm air hit me full force, cold and real, snapping the haze of Sub-7 from my lungs. I rolled onto what felt like shattered gravel or broken rooftop tar paper. The metal beneath me vibrated violently with impacts from below. I didn't stop. I crawled forward, dragging my legs through the gap. My boot got stuck for a half second, caught on twisted steel. Below, something vast slammed into the corridor. The hospital itself groaned. A wind like a hot exhale blasted from the bone doorway, rising into a howl so deep it shook the rooftop structure. The taloned creature screamed. Not at me, but at whatever was coming up behind it. My boot slipped free. I rolled away from the opening, just as something enormous rammed into the crack beneath me. The entire rooftop bucked. Through the widening gap, I saw it. For a single heartbeat, I saw the thing climbing out of Sub-8. A face or something shaped like one, too large to fit in the corridor. A maw lined with teeth like broken glass. No eyes, just pits. A body made of writhing limbs. Too many, too long. Exposed and raw like sinew pulled over a skeleton much too big. And worst of all, it was still growing, reassembling itself from whatever pieces the hospital had stored below for decades. The creature that chased me earlier scuttled into a corner, folding into a fetal position as the greater one approached. It whimpered like a dying animal. The massive thing roared. The roof shook again. The seam widened. For a terrifying moment, the hospital seemed ready to split open entirely. I scrambled backward on my elbows, searching for any stable surface. The rain hit my face cold and sharp. I dragged myself until my boots found purchase on a slanted section of roof. Below, the giant creature slammed its fists. Its many fists against the opening, cratering the metal. It was coming through. I staggered to my feet. The hospital beneath me convulsed, metal bending, bricks snapping from the walls. The opening grew wider. Concrete cracked. One limb broke through. A second. It was seconds away from pulling its full body into daylight. And I had no way off the roof. No ladder. No gutter. Nothing but a 40-foot drop onto cracked asphalt. I turned and froze because someone was standing at the far edge of the roof. A silhouette, human-shaped, tall, still, facing me. I blinked rain out of my eyes, raising my flashlight, and the beam illuminated a hospital ID badge hanging from the figure's collar. The name printed on it was Dr. Adrian Keller, lead archivist, Briarhurst Regional. My badge, my name, my face in the ID photo, except older, weathered, wrong. The figure lifted one hand, not to wave, to point behind me, toward the thing climbing out, as if to say, "You're not done yet." For a moment the rain, the creature, the hospital, the world, everything, fell away. All I could see was him, the silhouette standing at the edge of the roof. My silhouette, the rain sheeted across his face, but it barely distorted the features I already knew. My jawline, my brow, my posture, but older, more worn, eyes sunken, like he had stared at something for too long, something no one should ever see. My badge hung from his collar, soaked and swinging slightly with the wind. The photo on it had been printed with the crisp clarity of official documentation, a version of me that hadn't existed yet. He didn't speak. He just pointed behind me, and something in that gesture, slow, heavy, burdened, felt less like a warning and more like inevitability. I turned, just in time to see the thing from sub-8 heaving itself through the widening roof crack. The sound it made wasn't a roar this time. It was a groan, deep, pained, ancient. The wind bent around it. The rain stopped hitting the space directly under its emerging form, almost like the air was avoiding touching it. One massive limb slammed onto the rooftop. A fissure shot across the tar paper. Another arm followed, too long, bending at too many joints. Its skin glistened like something freshly unearthed, wet with fluid or time or both. A third limb clawed out, pulling more of its torso into the stormlight. Every part of me screamed to run, but there was nowhere to run. The rooftop was finite. The ground was too far. And the building wanted this. The older version of me lowered his hand. Then he spoke, not loudly, not urgently, just with the kind of quiet resignation that only comes from surviving something horrific. "You're not ready yet." Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating both of us, the creature rising behind me, and him standing calm at the roof's edge, like he'd seen all this before. I shook my head, stepping backward instinctively until the heat radiating from the creature's exposed sinew forced me to stop. My flashlight quivered in my hand, the beam bouncing between the two figures, the monster and the man who looked like me. "What does that mean?" I shouted over the wind. "Who are you? What is this place?" He didn't answer directly. His eyes, my eyes, shifted past me toward the thing climbing onto the roof. "Sub-8 wasn't the first," he said softly. A tremor raced through my chest. "What?" He stepped forward, closer to the edge. Rain dripped off his chin. He looked tired, impossibly tired, like he had carried whole decades inside him. The hospital built deeper than it ever admitted. Not floors. He paused, letting the wind whip his coat aside. "Failures." Behind me, the creature shrieked. The sound was not rage. It was pain. A sound like metal bending against itself. A sound like something pulled prematurely out of hibernation. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Its head, massive, malformed, was still pushing through the opening. It should have been too large to fit, but the hospital's roof convulsed around it, stretching inward like living tissue being coerced into shape. The building wanted it out here, needed it. The older me spoke again, voice grim. "Every time it climbs out, it remembers more." I whipped back toward him. "What do you mean every time?" He held my gaze. "Look at me." I did. I didn't see a stranger. I didn't see a twin. I saw someone who had been through hell. Someone who had gone down deeper than sub-8. Someone who had come back. But not the same. Lightning flashed again, and for the briefest fraction of a second, the rain around him froze in the air, hung motionless, suspended mid-fall. A time slip, a glitch, reality hiccuping around him. He wasn't just older. He was wrong. "Don't let it pull you," he said. The roof buckled under the creature's weight. A limb slammed down inches from my feet, spraying shards of gravel. The gust of hot, reeking air that blasted from its mouth knocked me to my knees. The older me reached out a hand, not to help me up, but as if reaching to pull me away from something he couldn't physically touch. "I can't save you," he said, voice breaking. "I was never allowed to save myself." The creature roared. The sound tore the storm open. The clouds above spiraled inward, drawn toward the building, toward the open wound in the roof. The older me stepped backward toward the ledge, raising his face toward the sky like he was listening to something above the thunder. "I came back here because you're part of this now," he said. "Because you were always going to be." Another roar shook the rooftop. The creature finally pulled its full torso onto the surface. Towering above me, limbs braced, flesh quivering. It turned its head, or the mass where its head should have been, toward the older me. And he didn't flinch. He stared back, broken, resolute, resigned. Then he whispered to me without looking away from it. "And now you understand why you can't escape." "No!" I shouted, scrambling back. "No, I'm not. You're not. I'm not going down there." "No," he said simply. "You go up." I blinked rain out of my eyes. "Up where?" He pointed at the sky. A bolt of lightning shattered the air above us, and a perfect circle of light opened in the storm clouds. A hole, portal, a ring of shimmering brightness carved into the gray, spiraling slowly like a glowing iris. The wind sucked upward, hard. The pressure grabbed at my clothes, pulling, tugging, lifting. The creature screamed, slamming its limbs into the roof to anchor itself. The older me didn't fight the pull. He let the wind lift his coat. He let his feet rise off the gravel. He smiled, sad, relieved, hollow. "You weren't ready," he repeated. "But you will be." The vortex tightened. I felt my body lift. The creature reached for me, too slowly, too clumsily, as if the force pulling me upward weakened it. Its limbs twisted, deforming under the strain. The older me drifted toward the light, but just before he vanished into it, he looked down at me with a final, exhausted tenderness. "I'm sorry for what you'll become." My body left the roof. The creature roared, reaching again. The light swallowed my vision. The hospital spun below me. Then, darkness, silence, a hatch slamming shut, and a voice, calm, mechanical, unfamiliar, spoke somewhere very close to my ear. "Welcome back, Dr. Keller. Sub-zero entry confirmed." My eyes opened. I was standing inside a vast, circular white chamber. I wasn't on the roof. I wasn't outside. I wasn't free. I was deeper than I had ever been. Deeper than the hospital itself. Sub-zero. Above sub-8. Above everything. But still trapped. Still part of the system. The chamber lights brightened. A wall screen flickered on. Rows of faces appeared. People staring through glass at me from an observation deck above. Scientists, doctors, archivists, silent, watching. Then I saw him, standing among them. Older me, not on the roof. Here, inside. He lifted a hand in the same slow gesture. Not pointing, waving, acknowledging, accepting, recognizing. "Cycle complete," the mechanical voice announced. "Subject returned." I stepped backward, trembling. Returned. Returned from where? Returned from when? The older me, my future, spoke at last, voice amplified through the observation glass. "Don't struggle. You'll remember soon." My breath froze. The chamber lights dimmed. The screen flickered. Then a new message appeared. "Subject prepared for next descent. Level sub-9." My knees nearly buckled. Sub-9? There was another level? How far did this thing go? The older me smiled, not cruelly, not kindly, just knowingly. "You asked what the hospital was," he said softly. The lights shifted red. "Now," he said, "you get to find out." The floor beneath me opened, and I fell, not down, not up, but somewhere sideways, into sub-9. The day never ended. It never would. Not here. Not anymore. And as the air shattered around me, one final whisper followed. "Welcome home."